Our last session, ending in verse 5 of chapter 10, dealt with a very boring history lesson. The Japhethites, or Caucasians. I'm a Caucasian and I found it boring. I really did. But now we get to the very exciting history. We get to the history of the Hamites. And you'll see why it becomes interesting after I read the names to you. I know. Reading of the names is always boring, but they are very strange names, according to my opinion, of course. Let's see what happens. Today's session is the Sons of Ham, part 1. And tomorrow, or with our next session, it's the Sons of Ham, part 2. Part 1. Here we go. Verses 6 to 12. Let's see if we can do this very quickly. Verse 6. And the sons of Ham, Cush, Mizraim, Phut, and Canaan. And the sons of Cush, Seba, Havilah, Sabta, Rama, Septika. And the sons of Rama, Sheba, and Dedan. And Cush begot Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one in the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore it is said, even as Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad, Calneh, and the land of Shinar. Out of that land went forth Ashur and built Nineveh, and the city Rehoboth and Calah. And Raisin between Nineveh and Calah, the same is a great city. Whew. Some of these we do recognize from other books in the Bible later on, don't we? So let's go. According to verses 6 to 20, which is basically the Sons of Ham part 1 and the Sons of Ham part 2. We ended in verse 12. But according to verses 6 to 20, Ham appears to have been the most prolific, being the father of 30 nations. No less than 30 nations. How boring. Japheth has, maybe a dozen or so. 30 nations from Ham. Wow. Canaanites, Orientals, Africans, Native Americans, Aborigines from Australia, all appear to be the descendants of Ham. Man, they really were fruitful and multiplied, didn't they? Much of this can be seen when missionaries discovered lost tribes in the very far east, like Indonesia, that resemble natives of Africa. I met one of them. He came all the way from Indonesia, which is near Australia. And he had a child going to the same school as our kid went. And I thought he was from Africa. He was from way east. It shows you how we had a common ancestry. Hamites have been the most inventive and innovative at maintaining bodily needs through their herbal discoveries and technological advances. Hamites, not the Japhethites. The Japhethites, like we mentioned before, were the intellectuals that were able to bind these things together into an organized train of study, an organized train of thought. But man, the Hamites, they were the most inventive and innovative. Hamites were the beginners of agriculture, developing textiles, weaving, metallurgy. Wow. Working in metals, iron workers, and jet propulsion, believe it or not. Look at China, their development of rocketry, painting, medical techniques, explosives. Did you realize that many of the medical techniques have come from the Far East? Look today, Chinese doctors with their acupuncture and everything else. Oh, man. You know what? Explosives, chemistry, and almost anything technological in nature can be accredited to the Hamites. Talk about creativity. Also, Hamites were responsible in building Babylon. We read that in Genesis 10:10, which we just read, and Genesis 11, verse 2. Genesis 10:10, and the beginning of his kingdom was Babel or Babel. Now, Cush was the oldest son of Ham. Cush meant black and was apparently the oldest son of Ham. And most of the time when Cush is mentioned, it is translated as Ethiopia. Mizraim means tribulation or fortress. I'm talking about, these are names of sons of Cush. It was the name generally given by the Hebrews to the land of Egypt, Mizraim. Phut meant a bow, as the third name in the list of the sons of Ham, applied to an African country or people. Some identify Phut with Libya in the northern part of Africa near the Mediterranean Sea. Finally, Canaan, the fourth son of Ham, and his descendants were under a curse in consequence of the transgression of his father. His eldest son, Zidon, was the father of the Sidonians and Phoenicians. They traveled pretty far in their ships and boats. And he had 11 sons who were the founders of as many tribes. We read that in Genesis 10:15-18, which is part 2 tomorrow. And so we continue with the sons of Cush. The name of the oldest son of Cush is Seba, meaning drunkard. Believe it or not, that's what it means. And he fathered a country and nation mentioned along with Egypt and Ethiopia. Seba. The Queen of Sheba came. That's Sheba, yeah. Probably the nation of Sudan, today's nation of Sudan, home of the Sabaeans. That's in Isaiah 45:14. Next in Cush's sons was Havilah, meaning he that suffers pain. And the third son, Sabta, meant a turning about. Rama, another son, meant thunder. And Saptika meant he that causes a wounding. These 4 sons of Cush had some crazy names that betrayed some of the violent times they must have suffered. These and their descendants settled around the Persian Gulf region. And as you know, around the Persian Gulf, man, there's still a lot of crazy stuff happening today, isn't there? So the last to be mentioned as the sons of Cush is the most notorious name of history, Nimrod. Nimrod was the youngest son of Cush, and his name literally meant, are you ready? Nimrod meant, let's rebel. I can only imagine the training he received from his dad for this very special purpose. Let's rebel. Whoa. In verse 8, it says, he began to be a mighty one in the earth. As the first great emperor in history. That's what the Bible even calls Nimrod. An emperor, the first emperor. Yeah. Yep. As the first great emperor in history, Nimrod's name is preserved in many legends and geographic statues and sites in Babylon. He's even mentioned as the founder of Wicca, witchcraft, by various covens of witches around the world today. That's right. The founder of one of the oldest religions in the world today, Wicca, is Nimrod. In verse 9, it states that Nimrod was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Now, in English, that sounds pretty good, doesn't it? But in the original Hebrew, the phrase illustrates a man mighty in wickedness, putting himself ahead of God. It gives you the new meaning, doesn't it? Read it a different way. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Actually, he was a mighty hunter, putting himself ahead of the Lord. That means he must have been very, very proud. So, verses 10 to 12, and we did end in verse 12, talk about the cities founded by Nimrod in the Shinar Valley, ancient Babylon, and the great metropolis of Nineveh. All of these cities were notorious for grossly indecent idolatry and human sacrifices to Marduk, or Marduk, the name of the god to which Nimrod was deified by none other than his mother after he died. This is a little side note before we finish. Is it mere coincidence that Nimrod was featured in numerous statues excavated by archaeologists as the baby on the lap of his mother, the Queen of Heaven, and looking identical in every detail to the Madonna and Child statues in Roman Catholic churches worldwide today? I think not.